we get our witness back. And just a reminder, you're still under oath.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nelson. Sure.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hey.
We'll get started while my computer resets. Hopefully it'll work in time. So, Ms. Scurry, you testified that you have been a 911 dispatcher for approximately 7 years at this point. Is that correct? And I just kind of want to roughly go back over, you described sort of 4 areas that you do, correct?
Correct.
So as I understand it, the first area is there are days or shifts where you have, you may be the actual call taker. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so as a call taker, a citizen calls 911, you pick up the phone and respond to whatever that call for service is. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you'll type it into a system. That information will get sent over to a dispatcher, correct?
Correct.
And the dispatcher is the person who is in charge of communicating with and assigning officers to calls, correct?
Correct.
And there are days when you show up for work and you're assigned to be the dispatcher, correct?
Correct.
You also described a third part of your job is to be the fire dispatcher, which is separate from police.
Correct.
Now, in preparation for trial, I believe on March 2nd, you met with members of the prosecution team, correct?
Correct.
And you made a statement, apparently made a statement that police is more fluid than fire. What did you mean by that?
Correct. So when fire calls come in, let's start over. There are most generally not times where the fire department comes upon an issue. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen where we can assign a rig that's come across someone who might be down on the ground or anything like that. But when a structure fire comes in, it's not because they were out driving around. It's because someone called soft flames or smoke, whatever prompted them to call. And then we send the rigs to where they need to go.
Okay. So basically, whereas police, they may be driving around and they may just see 2 people fighting on the corner, stop and have to deal with it, right?
Correct.
And so dispatching to police officers is a different process than dispatching to fire.
You are correct.
All right, so we've got the call taker, the dispatcher, the fire dispatcher, and what was the 4th aspect again?
We call it our Channel 7. It's an information channel. We mainly use it for officers coming in for off duties.
Okay.
Or when someone reports a lost child, we have different computers that we use to make sure we can log them appropriately in our national database.
Okay. So the Channel 7 responsibilities may include, when you say off duties, those are police officers who are hired as security at local businesses, things of that nature?
Yes.
So even though the officer is not on duty as a Minneapolis police officer, a business hires them and they still act as a police officer, correct?
Correct.
Now, and then there are those the lost children, things of that nature.
Yes.
Right? You also described that the city of Minneapolis is comprised of 5 precincts, correct?
You are correct.
First precinct being downtown, is that correct?
Yes.
And downtown is broken into 2 sectors, correct?
Correct.
And then you have the 2nd precinct, which is the northeast, right?
Correct.
The 3rd precinct, which is the southeast, right?
Correct.
The 4th precinct, which is the North Minneapolis, northwest side of the city, right?
Correct.
And the 5th precinct, which is the southwest side of the city.
You are correct.
All right. And each of those 5 precincts, like the 1st precinct has 2 sectors.
Mm-hmm.
The 3rd precinct, you said, had 4 sectors, right?
Correct.
And so essentially, there would be 2 squad cars downtown, 4 in southeast Minneapolis, and that's the totality of the police force in those two parts of the city. I mean, as far as patrol.
Patrol. At certain times it can be more. It depends on the shifts and when they're on.
So there may be an event or a concert, and they may bring in extra people, or something's going on where they would need extra officers.
Correct.
And oftentimes, there are fewer officers than are assigned sectors, correct?
There's usually always at least one squad per sector.
Okay. But those, like, officers call in sick or they go on training, and so the numbers of officers on the street at any time shifts from time to time.
Correct.
And it's fair to say that as a dispatcher, you're not a police officer, correct?
Correct.
You have not been through the police academy, through police training, things of that nature.
Correct.
But you don't know all of the police officers in the city of Minneapolis, right?
No.
Okay. Now, in terms of your previous testimony, you indicated that listening is a big part of your job.
Yes.
You said that the majority of your job is done by listening. Can you explain what you mean by that?
We are in a room with no windows. We work off of a phone and a radio the majority of our time. The other times would be only if we had some kind of video to show us, anything like that. Then other than that, we are always on a phone or radio.
Okay. Now, you said that there are 6 televisions, you believe, in the dispatch room? Is that right?
Throughout the whole center, there's 6 on the walls, 2 large ones on the ends, and then there's 1 in fire.
Okay. So
9 total.
9 total. Sorry, I had to do some quick math. And I'm just trying to get this set back up here, if I may have just a minute. There we go. Okay. Those televisions don't have the City of Minneapolis cameras up all the time, do they?
No, they do not.
Those televisions may have other information up. They may be off. I mean, they're not constantly on all the time.
They're always on, but you are correct. They're not always on cameras. We have other information that we put on those screens that we can have constantly running as reminders. We also have other screens that we utilize throughout the day too.
All right. And then in front of you, you have 4 or 5 different computer screens itself. It sounds like it's a very, moving job, right? Now, you testified that it's very rare that you actually see an incident that you've dispatched on these city cameras.
Correct.
Like, does it happen once a year? Like, is this the first time you remember it ever happening? How rare would you say it is?
I can't be specific, but there might be, in the whole time that I've been a dispatcher, maybe 3 to 4 calls that I've seen on our TVs.
Okay. And usually, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that may be brought up is because there's something that triggers someone to operate that camera and put it up, right?
Correct.
So you don't control the cameras.
You are correct.
You don't have access to the cameras through any of the screens in front of you. Is
Correct.
that right? Someone else who maybe like a manager or a supervisor has to do that?
Correct.
All right. But this incident was specifically brought up on the cameras, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, I got this all. You also were previously interviewed in connection with this case by Special Agent Brent Peterson. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was back on June 9th of 2020 at approximately 1 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And that was at the FBI field offices, or where was that?
It was over the phone. I was not in town.
Okay. So you had a phone interview with Agent Peterson, and I believe you had your union lawyer or something with you as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you, on May 25th, you were Channel 1 dispatch. That covers both the 2nd and 3rd precinct, correct?
Correct.
And there were, again, the 4 sectors of the 3rd precinct, Squad 310, Squad 320, Squad 330, and Squad 340, right? And you didn't necessarily know who the officers were assigned to those cars.
Correct.
Have you subsequently learned who the officers were who were assigned to those squad cars?
Yes.
So who was assigned to Squad 320?
Officer Lane, and I do not know how to correctly pronounce the other officer's last
King.
name. King.
All right. And Squad 330 was Officer Chauvin and Officer Tao, correct?
Correct.
And the other cars did not come, right? Squad 310 or 340 were not on scene, right?
Correct.
And ultimately, 830, did you identify who Squad 830 was for the Park Police?
I didn't.
Now, when this call initially came in, you again were not the call taker this day. You were the dispatcher, right?
Correct.
And so the call taker comes in, takes the call. You see the information that the call taker puts into the computer system, correct?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that that information is also being seen in the squad cars of a Minneapolis squad car, right?
Correct.
So when the call taker types in this information, it's visible to the officers in the squad car.
Yes.
And it allows them to respond as well. You can respond. Lots of people can respond to various calls, right?
Correct.
All right. I am going to go back to, with the court's permission, I believe this was Exhibit 151, which was the computer-aided dispatch. Can you see that in front of you?
Yes.
All right. Let's see if I can get rid of some of this stuff here. All right. Okay, so the call initially comes in at 8:02 and 13 seconds, correct?
Correct.
And as you described, that the caller reported that outside the reporting party that there's a male provided a counterfeit bill to the business. Suspect is a black male, 600 plus, that means 6 foot or higher.
Yes.
Okay. Sitting on top of a blue Mercedes-Benz ML320 with the particular license plate. And it also noted that it appears this person is under the influence, right?
Correct.
So at the time that the call came in, you would have seen that this person was suspected to be under the influence by the caller, right? As would the officers in their cars.
Correct.
And so you indicated that you had initially did you say you radio dispatched Squad 330 to this call?
Initially, yes.
Right. And that was because, and do you recall where they were at the time you dispatched them?
No.
Excuse me. Back in June 9th, when you spoke with Officer Peterson, or Agent Peterson of BCA, would you dispute me if I said you told him that they were at the precinct at the time of the call?
I would not dispute you.
Okay. And so it's, at that time, you believe that Squad 320, which was the sector car, was tied up, but they had not cleared something from the computer? Is that right?
Right. They were still on the call that they had been working on.
So let's talk about when an officer finishes a call. Is there something that an officer is supposed to do to say, hey, I'm done with this call, I'm on to the next one?
It is, they can either clear over the radio with us, clear me, whichever reported by ascent, whatever, there's a multitude of things, or they can clear themselves. On my screen, I have a status screen that shows me when a car is clear, when the car is en route, when they're on scene, and when they're code 4.
Okay. And so on one of these screens that's right in front of you, you have some sort of representation of each of the sector cars that you're responsible for dispatching. So if, for example, you have a call in Sector 310, and 310 is already occupied with some other call, you can send 320 or 330 or 340, or even somebody from a different precinct or sector, correct?
From a different precinct, it requires more conversations with a sergeant to pull response cars. It's a policy, or it's a policy of calling people and getting their permission to use their cars. But yes, if someone is busy and I don't have a 360 or whichever precinct 60 car to use, then I have to go to the closest available. Or if there's no one who's close and I only have one squad available, that's the person that has to go.
Okay. So when you are looking at your computer screen, do you see all of the precincts' cars and their availability, or do you only see the second and the third precinct?
I only see the second and the third.
Okay. Now, so you indicated that ultimately Squad 320 kind of took the call back, right?
Correct.
They said, hey, we're clear. We're going to go handle this call at the Cup Foods, right?
Correct.
And you're familiar with the, you said you were familiar with the 38th and Chicago intersection?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And does it get a fair number of police calls to that area?
That I don't have the statistics for.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be able to rattle off of a yes or a no.
Okay.
In the last year, yes. Before that, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. Now, Squad 30 was ultimately Squad 320 was ultimately backed up with Squad 830, the Park Police, and Squad 330, Officer Chauvin's squad car, right?
Correct.
And again, do you recall why you backed these officers up?
Initially, I believe I heard a loud something in the background. I would have to be reminded
Okay.
of what exactly I heard, but it was loud. And so until they were code 4, I started a squad to back them.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't just hear what an officer is doing at any given time, listen in on their calls, right?
No, they have to radio us to let us know what's going on.
All right. So when an officer pushes his button on his radio, or however they do it, it opens up the air or the microphone, so to speak. And that's what you're talking about. You're trained to listen, right?
Correct.
And when you spoke with Agent Peterson, do you recall telling him that you heard lots of yelling and things of that nature at one point when Squad 320 said they were taking one out?
I don't remember specifically. I believe I told him that because that was the reason why I asked for assistance.
Right. Squad 320 didn't call in and say, hey, we need help. You heard something that was concerning to you and you sent help.
Correct. And then when they said they were taking one out, had they said that first, I would have also started it then.
Right. And so Squad 830 was the first to respond?
Yes.
And I believe that they responded, let's see, at 8, 10, and 38 seconds, right?
These actions right here, the one with my numbers where it says backed up with 320, or 320 with 330 and 330 with 830, that is me using my tools at dispatch to just back them up. I don't see the arrival times on here.
Okay. So this, you see here, 525 at 20:12:21, 320 C4. That's code 4.
Correct.
Meaning all clear, right?
To my understanding, yes.
And then 830 out with 320 at 20:12:55. So roughly 40 seconds or 34 seconds later, Squad 320, or excuse me, Squad 830 is out with 320.
Correct.
Right? And then there was an inquiry to get some information, right? And ultimately then at 8:20 and 11 seconds, there was a code 2 call for a mouth injury, right?
Correct.
Meaning code 2 again, meaning just come in the matter of due course and no need to rush.
Routine, yes.
Routine, right. And then at 20:21:35, So again, about a minute and 24 seconds later, squad 330 EMS code 3.
Correct.
So someone assigned to squad 320, either Officer Chauvin or Tao, called EMS and stepped them up to code 3.
Squad 330.
Squad 330, right? Which would be Officer Chauvin or Officer Tao.
Correct.
All right. And they, code 3 means get here as quickly as you possibly can, right?
Correct.
Lights and sirens.
Correct. Sorry.
Now this particular document, Exhibit 151, does not have the arrival times, correct?
Not printed on it, no.
All right. Are you familiar with other documents or other printouts that would show various arrival times?
Yes.
And it would show other people who are associated with the case? Like what time, like who is assigned to which particular squad car?
Yes.
Okay. If I may have just a minute, if we could take this down, Your Honor. Mr. Frank, I'd be referencing Bates stamp 7438 for your information. Would it refresh your recollection, or would it help you to identify arrival times if you were to look at what's called an incident detail report?
Yes.
I'll ask you if you can show this screen to the witness. This hasn't been offered, Your Honor. I'm sorry?
I can't kill those screens, but not that one.
If I may have a minute. All right. Now, the incident detail report has a much more detailed time of like first keystroke, of when somebody starts typing, what time officers arrive. Every single time is documented very closely, correct?
Correct.
Now, would you disagree if I told you that the phone was picked up from the 911 caller at 8:01 and 15 seconds?
I can't disagree with that.
Okay. And I know that you don't have this right in front of you, but because of some redactions, I just have to walk you through these times.
Okay.
Would you agree or disagree, or would you agree that the first unit was assigned at 8:04 and 28 seconds?
Yes.
And that would be squad 330 was en route at 8:04 and 28 seconds.
Correct.
Then 320 took the call at 8:05 and 11 seconds and indicated that they were en route. So very short time, right?
Very short time.
Would you agree that if I told you that squad 320 arrived at Cup Foods at 8:08 and 10 seconds?
Correct.
Squad 330 being assigned to Derek Chauvin, to Tao. Squad 830 being assigned to Peter Chang of the Minneapolis Park Police. Squad 320 being assigned to Officers King and Lane.
Correct.
Now, in terms of
We're gonna go back to old school methods and print out some paper. We'll get there.
To your honor.
To them to speed this process up.
Mr. Nelson?
That's fine, Your Honor.
All right.
So for purposes of stipulation, EMS code 2 for a mouth injury was called at 8:20 and 11 seconds. EMS code 3 from squad 330 was called out at 8:21 and 35 seconds. The arrival time of EMS is 8:28 and 36 seconds. Am I reading that correct? So 8:28 and 36 seconds, EMS arrives, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then EMS didn't stay on scene, right?
No.
They left. And they indicated that they went to 36th and Park, right?
Correct.
And they didn't go to 36th and Park, did they?
EMS? That's where I believe they were.
Okay. So to your belief, they went to 36th and Park because that's what they called out, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall fire having trouble finding EMS at 36th and Park?
Yes.
Okay. Because they didn't go to 36th and Park, they went to 36th in Chicago, correct? Or do you not know?
I actually don't know. After those comments, I did not know that's where they went.
Okay. So ultimately, there was some confusion between fire and EMS about where EMS actually was. And you heard that radio chatter.
I asked the questions on Metcom, which is reflected in there, and then relayed the information that I had of 36th and Park, which was also added into the call. Other than that, I didn't know their locations.
Okay. Now, ultimately, you said that you were watching this video, and you were still watching your rest of your work, right?
Correct. I was actively still working.
So you look up for a couple seconds, look down, do your work, look up, look down, from time to time throughout the course of this incident.
You're correct.
All right. And so it's fair to say that your attention wasn't necessarily focused directly on the cameras and what you were seeing.
Correct.
But it was concerning enough to you what you did see that you called Sergeant Pluger of the Minneapolis Police Department 3rd Precinct, right?
I was concerned. Yes, because of the time of the length of the incident had not changed.
Okay. So you called,
And what-
we listened to your video, or the audio of your call with Sergeant Pluger, and you called Sergeant Pluger at 8:30 and 44 seconds.
Is that the time of the call?
Correct. 20, 30, 44.
Yes, and that's the first time we spoke.
So the first time you spoke was at 8:30 and 44 seconds. And in fact, during that phone call, you must have looked back at the camera and saw that they were all gone at that point, right?
Correct.
Because you said something to the effect of, oh wait, they're all gone, right?
Correct.
And your time that you had called into the Met link was at 8:31 and 12 seconds. Does that sound right to you?
For the Metcom hail?
Right.
Correct.
Then ultimately, Squad 330 indicated that they were going out to check on the status, and it says AP of the AP. That's something that Squad 330 typed into the system,
Correct.
and that was at 8:55:08, right?
Correct. Mhm.
Now, again, you were concerned because of the length of the time that you saw this incident unfolding, right?
Correct.
And I think you said that at one point you thought maybe the camera had even frozen,
Correct.
right? Because it seemed to be kind of prolonged, right? You can't hear anything on that video, could you?
No.
You had no idea what officers were talking about amongst each other or what they were talking about with others who were present, right?
You are correct.
And again, you, not being a Minneapolis police officer, are not familiar with the use of force requirements, correct?
You are correct.
All right. But you are aware that when uses of force are made or used, sometimes you'll hear dispatch, the officer call for a sergeant because they need someone to review a use of force, right?
Right.
And you, at the time you called Officer Pluger or Sergeant Pluger, you hadn't received any sort of a dispatch from Squad 320, Squad 330, or Squad 830, hey, we need a sergeant to review the use of force.
You are correct.
Now, every single time the Minneapolis Police Department uses force, do they go through the dispatch process?
Of using the radio,
Well, to get to the sergeant to report the use of force.
as far as I know.
Okay. So you don't know whether someone called up Sergeant Pluger on his cell phone and said, hey, we need you down here.
Correct.
And so, because at 8:30, when you called Sergeant Pluger, you had not yet heard that dispatch, right?
Correct.
And sometimes when a use of force incident occurs, that call may be to the sergeant to review the use of force, may be fairly quick, and sometimes it may take a few minutes, right?
Sure.
And
Yes.
it just depends on the circumstances and the situation, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, you indicated that there were these TVs. There are more cameras within the city of Minneapolis than 6 or 9 TVs worth, right?
Yes.
Are the televisions, like, are they split screen where you can see 5 or 6 cameras at one time, or is it one big TV with one big camera?
It is split screens, and then you can go into different camera views.
Okay. Just looking back through my notes. When you watched the video here in court, you said that it was similar to the video that you had watched previously, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that the video that we just watched in court seemed to be moving very slowly in terms of kind of choppy
Pace.
pace?
Yes.
Right. So an incident that you watched it in real time, subject to a few seconds of delay for the signal to get through, right?
Correct.
So I'm going to see if it makes a difference if we look at it on my computer. if we could, this is Exhibit 11. Yep, it should be plugged in. Is it, can we put it up? There we go.
Once it wasn't me.
It's day one, Your Honor. So. All right. So now when you watch the same video, it seems to be moving in a little faster time.
Correct.
Because these cameras actually transmit real-time occurrences.
Correct.
And you said that you first kind of took notice based on your estimate at 8:17. So I'm going to just skip forward here. This is 8:17 and 38 seconds. Back it up here a little. So this is 8:17 and about 30 seconds, and this is when you first sort of took notice of these cameras on the squad car, right?
Correct.
Or at the call center. Now, in terms of the pacing of this, is this more consistent with real time?
Yes.
And one of the things you ultimately told Agent Peterson was how you noticed how the squad car was rocking back and forth during the struggle.
Correct.
And if you could just watch this and tell me when you start to see that happen.
Well, it's currently shaking. And now currently shaking.
And by rocking back and forth, the car is actually going forward, a little backwards, and it's happening over and over and over again, right?
Correct.
And it's happening pretty much consistently during the course of the interaction of the officers, right?
Correct.
And that back door is opening and closing on the officers, right?
Correct.
Now, the other things that you notice when you look at this intersection, this is a pretty busy intersection, right?
Correct.
Lots of cars coming by, lots of people wandering about. This was May 25th, pretty nice spring day in the middle of, or not long after being cooped up inside here.
Correct.
So now ultimately, you observed and you saw these officers using force, right? Or what you believe to be force.
With taking him out of the squad?
Right. Or putting them in the squad.
Yes.
And there was, what you observed was a struggle between officers and the person they were arresting, right?
Correct.
And that the struggle ultimately resulted in that squad shaking back and forth.
Correct.
And when you ultimately called Sergeant Pluger, you said, I don't know if this is a use of force or not, right?
Correct.
And Sergeant Pluger told you that it could be just a takedown.
Correct.
And a takedown wouldn't require a supervisor.
Correct.
Ultimately, you know that Sergeant Pluger responded to the scene, right? And is that a, yes?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. And that's confirmed in the computer-aided dispatch or the incident detail report, right?
Correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Frank, can you redirect?
Scurry, just a few follow-up questions. I'm going to put 151 back up on the screen for you because I think in the questioning, I think counsel had asked you about MetLink, I think was the term he used. I just want to clarify that 2 points. So if we could put and I want to just clarify those times as well. So if we go down to the time of 20:31:12, and if we could just expand that out so we could all see it a little better, please. I think counsel had asked you about this 20:31:12, and that being the Metcom call. Having looked at this, what time was your Metcom call?
So the information I added was at 2033 for the Metcom. That is our resource that we use radio to radio in the metro, so we can be quick and be able to get information back and forth.
So that 20:33:02, what is the purpose of that entry right there? What are you reflecting?
I'm asking basically what is the reason why fire was added. I got on there and asked, what do you need fire for? Because there were no additional comments of saying why they were needed code 3.
And so what you've typed in there via Metcom is, and you sent out, yes?
Yes.
Is to tell what?
The information that I got via Metcom was that EMS would like the fire department for patient condition at the requested location of Park and 36th.
So that's the answer you got, is that that EMS wanted them to go there.
Correct.
All right. And so that was information you received before 20:33:02, but you sent out at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
There's the time of me typing and putting it in there.
When you have referred to your work duties that day, you can take it down, thank you, as Channel 1, how does that signify you from other dispatchers?
We have 2 other channels. There's Channel 2, which is in charge of the north side, and then there's Channel 3, who has downtown in the 5th precinct, and then we have a relief dispatcher who's there to help us when we take our breaks or when we need to get up for any given reason.
So when you dispatch over Channel 1, does that go citywide or just precinct-wide?
Just on those 2 precincts. I have my own dedicated channel.
Having been questioned by opposing counsel about your call, as you sit here today, have you changed your mind about the reasons why you called Sergeant Pleager when you did?
No.
You were asked about the number of screens that you have up, looking at all this, and still being able to see what was going on in this call from the city camera. That's been your work setup for about 7 years, correct?
Correct.
Something you do on a daily basis is keep track of all these moving parts.
Yes.
And that video that's up there, when it's not sending out work messages, can put up these city cameras, correct?
Correct.
But you don't control that.
Correct.
Do you know who or what office controls that?
It can change. Sometimes the supervisors at our center can pull up cameras. Like I said, sometimes we put them on there just to see what the weather is. Especially if we have inclement weather, if there's storms coming through, we can see actually how severe they are when people are calling in. Sometimes they put them up for incidences if we can see anything, and those cameras can be taken away from us. to the fact that the base, which is the precinct desk, has control over them and can move them to wherever they need to when they need to.
So what you're saying is that those cameras, where they're pointed and when they're available to you, can be controlled by members of the police department.
Correct.
And in your 6 years by this date and 7 years now, it's a rare incident for somebody to put an incident up on the screen like that.
Correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Scurry. You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
Statement called its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state calls Alisha Euler.
Stand right behind your chair to start. Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
All right, have a seat. And just to make sure that we can hear you, we're going to have you take your mask off. I'm going to leave mine on, but and before you begin, and so we can test out the microphone, could you give us your full name, spelling each of your names?
Like my whole name?
Yep.
Alisha Marie Euler, ALISHA,
And I think I'm going to have you pull up just a little closer to the microphone. Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Slisher.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And Ms. Euler, the key I'm going to give you is that when you speak, you should be able to hear your own voice over the speakers, all right? So just lean close enough to the microphone to be able to do that, all right? So first, I'm going to ask you a few questions so we can get to know you a little better. How old are you?
23.
23. And are you originally from Minnesota?
No.
Where did you grow up?
No, I'm from Arizona.
You can kind of pull back. You're actually speaking.
I'm sorry. I don't like this. Okay.
Yeah, I just need you to speak towards me.
Okay, am I good? All right.
Thank you. And you can even pretend you're yelling at me if you want to, or make your voice hit the back of the room, all right?
Okay.
So you said that you grew up in Arizona, is that right?
Yep.
What part of Arizona?
Just Arizona.
The whole state?
Yep.
Okay. When did you make your way over to Minnesota?
I don't know. A while ago.
Were you still in high school?
Yeah.
Did you attend any schools when you moved to Minnesota?
Yeah.
Where did you go to school?
Red Wing.
In Red Wing, Minnesota? Where else did you go?
St. Paul.
St. Paul? Okay. What's the last grade you completed through high school?
11.
Okay. Can you tell the jury the different cities or towns that you've lived in since coming to Minnesota?
I guess Minneapolis.
Okay. Minneapolis, and I assume Red Wing for
Yeah.
one,
St. Paul.
and St. Paul. Okay. Are you currently employed?
No.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about the types of jobs that you've held?
I used to work at Speedway.
And which speedway do you recall the location?
38th in Chicago.
Right. What did you do at Speedway at 38th in Chicago?
I'm a shift lead.
Shift lead? What does that mean?
Like not like a regular employee, but not a manager, like kind of in the middle.
Okay. So not a lot of us have had the experience of working as a shift lead at Speedway. So I'd like you to just tell the jury a little bit of what's your day-to-day job like when you have that job.
I work at a cash register. I do paperwork. If a customer has an issue, I handle the issues.
Okay. You also work as a cashier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to train other people or supervise other cashiers?
Sometimes.
How long did you have that job, Ms. Euler?
About a year.
Did you start as a shift lead, or did you have a
Yeah.
different position? You started as a shift lead? Can you tell the jury a little bit about the types of hours you would work there? Was it a full-time job?
Yep, I work 40 hours a week.
Okay.
Well, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. When did you typically start your shift?
Between 2 or 3 to closing 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock was closing?
Yeah.
Was it a pretty busy store?
It has its moments.
Okay. Well, I'd like to see if you recognize the area. First, I'd like to show just the witness what's been marked for identification as Exhibit 1. Oh,
All right, Mr. Fisher.
thank you. Ms. Euler, we're ready for you now. I'm going to show you, first I'm going to offer Exhibit 1. And then I'm going to show you Exhibit 1. If you can take a look at the screen, just the one in front of you.
Oh.
All right. Do you recognize what's shown in Exhibit 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see the speedway where you used to work?
Yeah.
I need to speak up a little bit.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So, do you have something that looks like this in front of you? A little stylus? All right. What I'd like you to do is just take this and see if you can draw a circle around the speedway where you used to work. Thank you. Right. And the name of the store directly across the street, were you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
What's the name of that store?
Cuff foods.
You ever go in that store? Were you a customer there?
Not really.
Not really? Just a place across the street where you worked?
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you see what's directly across the street if you cross 38th Street from Cup Foods?
Yeah.
Do you recognize that building?
Yeah, I didn't know that's what it was, though.
What did you know it as?
I never really paid attention to it.
Okay. Well, do you recall whether or not you were working on May 25, 2020, Memorial Day?
Yeah.
And where were you working?
At Speedway.
At Speedway. All right. And do you recall when you began your shift?
About 3 o'clock.
And do you recall specifically what you were doing at the Speedway that day?
Ringing up customers.
And at the cash register?
Yeah.
Can you just, again, using your stylus, point or maybe put a little X around the area in front of the store where the cash register would be?
Like right here.
Okay. Are you able to see the outside across the street from the cash register?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes? And you said you began working at 3. I'd like to draw your attention to a little after 8 o'clock in the evening that day. Do you recall something that caught your attention outside of the Speedway?
Yeah.
You tell the jury what caught your attention.
The police, like in that area, it's always police.
When did you first notice, or where did you first notice the police?
I would say like on the corner, right, like diagonal, like across the street, like right here. Oops.
Okay. And so for the record, that's across from Cup Foods, across 38th Street in what is labeled on Exhibit 1 as Dragon Walk. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Please tell the jury in your own words what it is you saw that caught your attention.
Just the police, try not to cuss, just them messing with someone.
Okay. And when you say messing with someone, and thank you for not cussing, but when you say messing with someone, could you please describe what you mean by that?
Like, I don't really know how to explain it, just like disturbing somebody before I found out who it was.
Okay. Now, did you eventually find out who the person the police were disturbing, in your words?
Yeah.
Who's that?
George Floyd.
Had you ever met this person before?
No.
To your knowledge, he'd never been a customer in the Speedway?
No.
Okay. Can you please describe for the jury what you saw after you first noticed the police having this interaction with the person you now know to be Mr. Floyd?
Can you say that again?
So can you just describe, after you first noticed the police having this interaction with Mr. Floyd, what did you see happen?
Him in handcuffs.
You saw where was Mr. Floyd when you saw him in handcuffs?
Over here across the street.
Okay, in the area where you first indicated, by the Dragon
I
Walk?
believe so, yeah.
And then what did you see happen after Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs?
I don't remember.
What's the next thing you do remember?
Oh, God.
Are you a little nervous today?
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. You just take your time, and we have plenty of time to get through this, okay? And so, just backing up, you'd indicated that Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs, and just think to yourself what you next remember seeing after you noticed he was in handcuffs.
I think they ended up putting him in the police car thing.
And which police car? Where was the police car that you saw?
The one right across from Cup Foods.
Okay. Now, before you saw that, did you see the police take Mr. Floyd across the street?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes? All right. So after you saw him in handcuffs, you saw him being taken across the street and then placed in the car right outside of Cup Foods. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you owned a cell phone, correct?
Yeah.
You owned a cell phone at the time. Yes?
Yes.
And did you do anything with your cell phone as you began to notice this incident involving Mr. Floyd and the police?
Well, as you guys seen that on the security thing that I had my phone.
Right, you had your phone. Did you do anything with your phone?
Like recording it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'd like you to do first, before we get to the point where you start recording, just explain to the jury what you saw after you noticed the police officers putting Mr. Floyd in the car?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I can't think right now.
Well, you indicated that you began recording with your cell phone. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And during the time that you've been speaking to the police about this, you've provided your cell phone recordings to law enforcement. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
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 All right. And there were a total of 7 cell phone recordings that you personally took. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've reviewed each of those cell phone recordings, correct?
Yeah.
And those cell phone recordings, do they fairly and accurately depict what you saw on the street that day?
Yeah.
And 2 of those cell phone recordings were actually made from inside the store, correct?
Yes.
And then the rest were outside of the store.
Yeah.
Now, those cell phone recordings, the individual clips, have been marked and disclosed to counsel as exhibits 2 through 8. You wouldn't know that, but they have. And at this time, I'm going to offer exhibits 2 through 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any objection?
No, you're
2 through 8 are received.
And then, Ms. Euler, you also had an opportunity to review a surveillance video. Is that right?
Yes.
And the surveillance video, for the record, is Exhibit 11. Having reviewed that video, did that video, fairly and accurately capture things that you observed when you were working at Speedway on the 25th?
Yes.
Okay. And then you were able to review that surveillance video in a format in which all of your cell phone videos, or I guess I should say 6 of the 7 cell phone videos, had been spliced into or put next to the surveillance video, correct?
Yes.
And that kind of gives a perspective of when those individual videos were shot. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the combination of the 6 videos that we've just received and Exhibit 11, which has been offered and received, would that composition better help you and assist you in explaining your testimony to the jury?
Yes.
All right. And that, for the record, is Exhibit 9. I offer Exhibit 9.
Any objection? 9 is received.
And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and publish Exhibit 9. I ask you to take Exhibit 1 down. And when I say publish, I mean I'm going to play it, and at times I'm going to stop and pause and have you explain some things. All right?
Okay. Okay.
All right. If we could begin publishing Exhibit 9, please. And I believe we're paused at 7 seconds. At this point, you can see, and I'm going to place a circle around the officers. You see them there?
Yes.
And are those the people that you saw interacting with the person you now know to be Mr. Floyd?
Yep.
And your first interaction that you noticed was actually across the street by the Dragon Walk. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, as Mr. Floyd's being taken over the car, I think that we will soon hear your first recording. So if we can resume play.
Always some shit going on over here.
After you made that short recording, and that was you, I suppose, narrating.
Yes.
Okay. After you were narrating that portion, you continued to watch.
Yes.
Now, at this time, Ms. Euler, did you notice any bystanders, anybody in the street?
No.
We're going to be approaching 8:16 and 30 seconds. Ms. Euler, were you continuing to watch the events as you were working the cash register at Speedway at this time?
I believe so, yes.
All right, now we've paused at about 8:17, and at some point, did you notice some other police officers arrive on the scene?
I think so.
Let's resume play here. Okay, and let's pause. Now, at this time, I'm showing you two other individuals who are joining the first two officers that you saw. You noticed those?
Yeah.
And what did you see those two officers do after they arrived?
I don't remember.
Let's continue. From your vantage point inside the Speedway, were you able to hear anything outside?
No.
All right, let's pause here for a moment, and we're at 8:18 and 10 seconds. Now, as best you can, describe for the jury what you recall seeing the officers do with Mr. Floyd prior to getting to this point.
Before this point?
Before this point, for example, did you see Mr. Floyd get into a vehicle?
Like off of what we just watched?
What do you recall seeing with Mr. Floyd and the squad car just before we get to this point?
Like when they drag him out?
Okay. All right, let's resume. Now we're paused at about almost 8:19. I asked you previously about bystanders and noticing bystanders. At some point, as you made these observations, did you see a crowd of bystanders gather?
Not till like after.
After what?
Like after they did yeah.
Okay. So at this point, you're not seeing a crowd either in the immediate area or across the street at the Speedway?
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
Okay. Well, let's resume play. No, you can keep going. I'm going to pause here. And this is at 8:20 and 20 seconds. Can I ask you some questions about some people, again, some bystanders in the area? Do you know who this person in the lower left corner wearing sandals and shorts and a black shirt is?
No.
Don't recognize him, never seen him before?
No.
Do you know the person in the dark shirt, hooded sweatshirt, and the blue pants?
No.
Never met her before either?
No.
Okay. Or how about the child behind her in the green shirt?
No.
Not familiar with her either?
No.
Okay. If you please resume. I'm going to pause for a moment here. Do you recognize that person, that officer? Do you recall seeing an officer interacting with a group of bystanders who would later gather?
I think so.
Can you physically describe that person as best you can remember?
I don't really know. It's been so long.
Do you recall previously talking about a bald police officer?
I think in one of my videos I was talking to a person.
Okay. A bald officer. Do
Yeah.
you recall as you sit here today what the bald officer did?
I think he was like yelling at people. Like before or after this?
Do you also recall describing a tall officer?
Yeah.
What did the tall officer do?
I think he was like, I don't remember. There's so much.
Let's resume play.
There's always some shit going on.
Pause for a moment. Now, what we heard there that was imposed at the same time as the surveillance video was your second recording. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
And again,
Yes.
that was your voice when you said there are always some.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Had you continued to watch these events out the window that entire time?
Did I watch it outside?
From inside?
I think I went outside to smoke a cigarette.
All right, I'm going to ask the play to resume and ask you to pay particular attention to your video on the right side, okay? Freeze. Yeah, go a little bit further. Stop. All right. Now, I'm showing you what appears to be a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize that?
Yeah,
Who's that?
that's me.
Okay. So that's you recording the events reflected in the window, correct?
Yep.
So based on that, would you agree that you were inside the speedway at the time this particular recording was made?
Yes.
Resume, please. Pause. Now, can you please explain to the jury why did you continue to record what you were seeing here?
Because I always see the police, they're always messing with people, and it's wrong and it's not right.
I'm going to then direct your attention to the right side of the screen as well. You say that you briefly turned your camera away from the officers in the squad car towards the area that's right by the Dragon Walk. Is that right? And can you tell the jury what you see here?
I see people standing there, but that's not why I shifted the camera.
Can you explain why you shifted the camera?
Because that's where it started from.
Okay, so when you say that's where it started from, I think your description initially was that there were some officers who were, to use your words, messing with Mr. Floyd.
Yep.
Okay, and this is the area in which they were messing with Mr. Floyd?
Yep. When it started.
I'd like to resume play again, please. Let's pause for a moment, and you can see that your that would have been your second recording has stopped. And at this point, we're continuing to watch the surveillance video. Please resume. We could freeze here. Let it go just a little further. Stop. All right. So again, I've already asked you about some of the people in the crowd, and you said you didn't know them. I want to add some of folks. There's a person in a white T-shirt. Do you recognize that person?
I don't know that person.
You've never seen that young woman before?
Not before like this.
Okay. And then I think walking by, I don't know if you noticed, there was a couple with a child. Had you ever seen them before?
No.
And then there's a gentleman here in a dark hooded sweatshirt. Had you ever seen that person before?
No.
Please resume. Now, at some point, you indicated that you'd gone outside of the store to smoke a cigarette. Is that right?
Yep.
You continue to watch these events unfold as you were outside of the store?
Yep.
As you were watching from outside the store, did you see any of the bystanders interact with police officers?
I think they were like yelling at each other. I don't really know what they said. I was kind of too far away.
Couldn't make out any specific words?
No.
Do you recall seeing a woman with a black shirt and a white headband?
No. This was like really, this was like a year ago. A long time ago.
Go ahead and resume. All right. If you could pause. All right. I'd asked you about seeing a woman with a black shirt and a white headband. I'm wondering if now looking, if this refreshes your memory at all about this person.
No.
All right. From outside, then, at your vantage point, outside of the Speedway, you began what is now your fourth recording, and I think for the record, that starts at about was it 8:25:26? Please resume.
What happened?
I don't know. I know that the tall dude that's leaning on his feet, they had him in the other side of the car, and then he pulled him out on the ground.
You could pause for a moment. Right. Whose voice was that?
That was mine.
Okay. And were you describing to someone who was standing next to you what you just witnessed earlier?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could resume, please. Pause. It seems that you've spent a lot of time watching this encounter.
Yeah.
And you were continuing to occasionally record.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could resume, please. If you could pause. Did you hear that ambulance in the background?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, do you recall an ambulance actually arriving?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. As best you can remember, can you describe what you saw after the ambulance got there?
I think the person was going on a stretcher.
If we could resume, please. If you'd stop. And at this point, you can see that the ambulance has arrived, and there's a ambulance worker coming out of the passenger side of the vehicle. Is that right?
Yeah.
In the time that you've been watching up to this point, did you see this individual ever get up from the first position he was in when he first went down?
I don't remember.
Please resume. Stop. All right. So you see that the street camera has now changed positions. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
do you recognize that person?
That's me.
That's you. Okay. So that's you, and you're holding your cell phone.
Yep.
And that's you recording, so we can give the jury a good idea of where you were at the time you were taking that footage. Right? And that's when the ambulance arrived. You continued to observe. Please resume. Do you ever personally observe the officers get up off of George Floyd?
I don't think so. I don't know.
If you could pause, back up about 2 seconds.
I think I was more so like I was recording it, but I was also like trying not to get hit by the cars coming in the gas station.
All right, understood. All right, if you could resume then, please. If you can pause, you can see the stretcher is fully out here. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then I want to draw your attention again to the last officer closest to the head of the individual on the ground. Did you see him change position at this point?
No.
Okay, please resume. Your final recording as Mr. Floyd was taken from the ground, loaded onto the stretcher, and placed in the back of the ambulance. If you could pause, please. And then you see that at approximately 8:29 and 29 seconds p.m., Mr. Floyd is fully placed into the back of the ambulance. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Please resume. And at that point, if you would pause, please, at 8:29 and about 52 seconds, I believe, 52, 53 seconds, you stopped recording. Is that right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. And you can take that down now. What did you see after the ambulance pulled away?
There was just a bunch of people yelling and fighting, and I didn't really understand why, but now obviously we know why.
What did you do after you stopped? After you stopped watching outside?
I went back to work.
And that would have been around about 8:30.
I don't remember.
Do you remember when your shift ended?
10 o'clock.
And so you worked up until 10 o'clock.
Yep.
Do you recall what you saw after you left work that day?
Tape. There was a bunch of tape everywhere, and they made me like, instead of going down Chicago to go home, they made me like go around and like down the street, like all the way down, I think like 35th.
Because the scene had crime scene tape around it,
Yeah.
and you weren't able to access it. Did you make another recording of that crime scene tape?
I think I did.
And at this time, I believe we've already received Exhibit 7, and I'd like to publish Exhibit 7, please. Yeah, that'd be good. Well, you know what? I'm almost finished here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. If we could just publish Exhibit 7. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's Exhibit 8. All right. If you could pause, please. And Ms. Euler, you described the scene being taped up with crime scene tape and you weren't able to access it. Does it show the area where the crime scene tape was?
Yes.
All right. If you could resume play, please. And stop. All right, and you can take that down. What did you do then after you made that recording?
I went home.
And at some point, you were contacted by police officers, is that right?
Yeah.
They talked to you about what happened, took a statement from you,
Yeah.
and you voluntarily provided the videos to them, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Council's going to have some questions for you, but I think we're going to take a break first.
Let's take our 20-minute break. Let's reconvene at 3:25.